if it goes live. There we are. What's up, horror fans? Pete here from the Lasser Cast on my mom's leather couch, looking pretty sexy. Danny's just busting out a cup that says creepy or something on it. Creeping is real. That is the truth. And Danny, as far as podcasts go, this is a special episode. Did you know that? That's right. Danny just did a thing in sign language, which you podcasters won't hear. It's our 100th episode. Yes. So you can appreciate the Lasser Cast, whether it is a podcast or YouTube show. I am here, and I'm, of course, with my brother in crime, Danny Torkel. Danny, you ready to talk about Cabinet of Curiosities, episodes 5 through 8?
Yes, very much so. Ready to go.
Nice. So last time
for the
around,
100th time.
Nice. Well, we've made like a shit ton of videos. There's like 400 and something videos on our channel.
I know, it's crazy.
Yes. But as far as the show goes, we're reviewing Guillermo Del Toro's Anthology series that's been on Netflix since about October 26th. And we're doing episodes 5 through 8. We covered episodes 1 through 4 last week with special guests Gage Greenwood and Daniel Barnett. This time around, Danny, we have 2 episodes based on Lovecraft stories. Have you read those Lovecraft stories?
I have, but it was probably 20 years ago now. I took a class in college called Horror, Film, and Fiction, which they might as well name the class for me because that was like I was going to take that no matter what. And we had to buy a couple of I bought an anthology series called The Dark Descent that had a few Lovecraft stories in it. And then there was another smaller Lovecraft compilation that we had to buy. We had to read a bunch of Lovecraft stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But my cats are scratching the new furniture, which is wonderful.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, you know what? You could have used those.
We literally sit on the couch now with a various amount of like devices to like slap the cats when they try to scratch the furniture. So.
Oh man, that sounds annoying.
Yes, but yes, I did read both of these, but it was probably between the years 2000 and 2004 when I was in college.
Gotcha.
Yes, folks, I'm that old, and so. I remembered PICKMAN'S model a lot better than I remembered Dreams in the Witch House. I feel like what I remembered most about Dreams in the Witch House was the late Stuart Gordon did an episode of Masters of Horror. I think it was maybe like the premiere episode of season 2. Yeah. And, you know, Stuart Gordon, of course, was one of the great modern adapters of Lovecraft, even though most of it was him kind of putting his own spin on things,
right?
With movies like Reanimator, From Beyond, Castle Freak. So I think he did Dreams of the Witch House for Masters of Horror, and I remember that episode. And this episode 6, reminded me a little bit of that, but I think I like the Stuart Gordon one a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
But what did you think? I liked PICKMAN'S model. It might be my favorite of these 4.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I don't know. I think it might be my favorite of these 4. I mentioned this to you the other day, and I'll let you tell what you think.
Sure.
I thought, and I got I listened to you, Gage, and Daniel. I'm really upset I missed that one. But I liked collectively episodes 1 through 4 better than episodes 5 through 8 of this series.
Yeah, I would say the same for myself. I liked 1 through 4 better as well. I liked Outside a lot, which Gage and Daniel and me all talked very highly about.
That was the one that Anna Lily Amirpour did.
Yes, the one with like the woman putting the lotion on her face. Yeah.
That one the autopsy
The
was
autopsy.
fantastic.
Yes.
And I'm an unabashed lover. I've said this many times on this channel of Stephen King's Graveyard Shift. And I also love Lovecraft. And I loved Graveyard Rats. It reminded me of a combination of a Lovecraft story with Stephen King's Graveyard Shift.
Mm-hmm.
And I got such a kick out of that episode. It might have been my overall favorite of the whole series.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But yeah, I definitely thought 1 through 4 were better than 5 to 8.
Well, you know what? Since we're kind of talking in generalizations, I kind of wanted to bring up a point about this show. Don't you kind of feel like it's a very thematically diverse series of episodes, right? Like, if you look at the very last episode, right, the Murmuring, and then you look at like Graveyard Rats, they seem very, very different, right?
Yeah. Lots of tonal shifts.
Right.
Lots of yeah, I agree with you.
I feel like the idea behind the show, and maybe I'm wrong, but it feels like Guillermo Del Toro, his main focus was to let directors showcase their vision with specific stories. And they used Lovecraft stories, they used stories that Guillermo Del Toro wrote, but it's like the Panos Cosmatos episode, The Viewing, that's a Panos Cosmatos film, right?
Yeah, that might as well be an accompaniment to Mandy or Beyond the Black Rainbow.
Right.
Yeah, that felt very much along with that style. And the Murmuring felt, I mean, it's Jennifer Kent directing Essie Davis.
Right.
In a movie about loss and grief.
Right.
And I'm like, this might as well be a companion piece to the Babadook.
Exactly.
Although I didn't think it as scary as the Babadook. I think the most interesting of these episodes was The Viewing.
Okay.
But I think
out of these four? Okay.
5 through 8. I thought The Viewing was the most interesting.
Yeah.
It was the most kind of out there in terms of like what is going on.
Yes.
I'm a sucker for Peter Weller.
Yes.
And he was everything I hoped for. I also loved a lot of the casting choices throughout.
Yeah.
I mean, especially the quirkiness of, and I'm sure we'll talk about it a lot in a minute, but Crispin Glover as Pickman.
Right.
Peter Weller as Lionel in The Viewing was an inspired choice.
Yeah.
And I really thought, considering most people will only know Andrew Lincoln as Rick on The Walking Dead.
Yeah.
I thought this was a really nice performance from him as like this grieving husband who's dealing with, a wife who's very disconnected. I thought he was very good.
Yeah.
There's really only one episode that I didn't love.
Okay.
And that I think Daniel Barnett. Yeah, I think he brought it up last week, and that was, I think it was Dreams in the Witch House. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't my favorite version of that story.
Right.
Everything else I thought was kind of between good and very good. But I didn't think anything of these 4 episodes was blow away great. Whereas the first 4, I was really into, and I was like, I can't wait. I'm not even going to watch the credits. I'm just going to let Netflix do the thing where it goes next episode.
Right.
Go.
Yeah.
But that being said, if he's going to keep doing this,
right,
I would love to see like Cabinet of Curiosities season 2, where he just picks 8 new directors with 8 new stories. Absolutely. And lets them go crazy. Because that's, you kind of hit the nail on the head there, especially with the Panos Cosmatos episode. it just kind of feels like he was like, you know, in his thick accent, like, okay, Panos, do what you want. You know?
Right. You know, it's funny. Daniel and Gage and I talked a little bit after the recording, and he started to talk about these episodes right here. And he said that one of the two Lovecraft stories, they did a very different take on the story. And I couldn't remember if he said it was Pickman's Model or Dreams from the Witch House, but he said that one of them was very different from the story. And I was
just on Wikipedia,
yeah.
so bear that in mind. But I was just looking up the original plot of the story of Dreams in the Witch House, and it feels like that one might be the one that they took the most liberties with, because nowhere in the plot description did it say anything about a sister.
Okay, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And to be honest, I kind of thought that whole storyline kind of held the episode back. Whereas Pickman's Model felt very much like the story I remembered, of like the artist whose art is too dark for everyone, and if you know, just by looking at the art, you start to kind of go a little insane, and you start to see the monsters. That felt very much like the idea that the reason his art is as dark and disturbing as it is because he's getting inspiration from, in typical Lovecraft fashion, you know, there's the elders,
right.
those like genuine old god monsters that are inspiring him in some way. That felt very much, and I think that's why I liked it so much, even though Crispin Glover was so out there and so quirky. But
go ahead. What I was gonna say was that for me, I was kind of worried about what Gage and Daniel were gonna say. They both had to bow out for tonight, but I was worried if they were gonna kind of judge me for my picks, because for me, I really liked the viewing. That was my favorite one. I love Panos Cosmatos' aesthetic. I love his direction. I think he's great. I did not really like either of the Lovecraft adaptations. And then for me, this is going to sound kind of lame, but I actually didn't really like the Murmuring. I understand what they were trying to do. I think that what you said before about the performance by Andrew Lincoln, like that was a really good performance. And honestly, I'm not a Walking Dead fan. I stopped watching by like the second season, and I thought that he was kind of over the top as what the fuck, Rick. Right? You know, but I remember him from Love Actually, and I thought he was kind of a decent actor in that. But I was like, oh man, I didn't even realize it was Andrew Lincoln until about halfway into the episode. And then that became the appeal of the episode was, wow, look, Andrew Lincoln's really good. But it just kind of felt like, okay, I know where they're going with the story. Let's get to it. And I was like, is there going to be a weird monster in this? Because there's weird monsters in every single episode. And then there wasn't. But we'll talk about the Murmuring when we get to it. But let's go one by one through each episode. And one thing that you and I started once, but then we haven't really done consistently, is I think we should rank each episode as far as like giving a number rating from 1 to 10. So I'll start us off. Pickman's Model is pretty low on my scale. I would give it like a 6 overall, and that might even be generous. It was directed by Keith Thomas, who we loved one of his films, The Vigil, in 2019. But then he also directed the Firestarter remake from 2022.
Which I didn't see, but I've also heard not a single positive thing about.
Exactly.
I don't know. And it's disappointing because, like, I feel like he did The Vigil, which was this, like, very low budget little movie. And he was given a Stephen King, like, remake property to do. And I don't know if it kind of felt like maybe the studio just handcuffed him and didn't let him make the movie that he wanted to make. But again, I didn't see it, so I don't want to talk too much shit about it. Then again, I don't think the original Firestarter is that great of a movie. I think it's got its moments, but I don't think it's that great. I would probably give Pickman's Model somewhere between a 7.5 and an 8. Oh God, my cats are just. Oh, okay. Yeah, I would probably give it a little bit higher than you. But just because I'm such a fan of Lovecraftian style stuff, like
Yeah.
anything with like the old gods and the people going crazy from just looking at images.
Yeah.
I really liked. It felt very similar in a way. I feel like this is a companion. This could be a companion piece to In the Mouth of Madness.
Okay.
And I felt very similar the way William Thurber, played by Ben Barnes, I
Yes.
feel like what he was going through was very Sam Neill-esque.
Okay. Okay.
And I spent, like you with Andrew Lincoln, I spent about 30 minutes of this episode going, where the fuck do I know this guy from? And then I looked him up and I went, Billy Russo. Ooh. Because he was Billy Russo in The Punisher. Netflix is The Punisher.
Oh, okay. 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 Okay.
Who
Yeah, I know
becomes
him.
Jigsaw, right? Doesn't he?
Jigsaw. Okay. Okay. So he's in that second season of The Punisher. He he's the brother-in-law in Westworld, and you were saying that you didn't watch Westworld, but that's where I remember him from. And he's in a bunch of other things too. He's in this Netflix show, which is based on these books I read called like Shadow and Bone. He's gotten around. He's this charismatic dude, and he seems very charismatic at the beginning of the episode, but slowly but steadily, he's like losing his mind, and he's very paranoid after being exposed to Pickman's work. Now
Yeah.
You brought up Crispin Glover. It's the accent, right, man? That's what's throwing you off is the accent.
I'm not going to complain too much because when you hire Crispin Glover, you're just kind of asking for a level of insanity.
Yeah.
And that accent to me is just a level of insanity. Like this to me was this was like we need you to do a Boston accent. Can you do a Boston accent? And him basically parodying every Boston accent he'd ever heard.
Right.
And it was so over the top and it was so ridiculous. But at the end of the day, it's Crispin Glover, and he's got the prosthetic with the nose that like hooks that. I was just like, if they would have hired any other actor, I'd be like, this is so stupid. I can't even take it seriously.
Yeah.
But for some reason with Crispin Glover, I was going crazy with it. You know, it just worked for me.
Well, you know what? Maybe I will give this a 7 actually, because Crispin Glover is pretty great in it. And one thing I realized too is that the imagery in it, I think, is the most horrific out of all these 4 episodes. Like the imagery in the paintings, there's definitely like nightmare-inducing imagery in this episode. There's a creature in it, just like there's a creature in 7 out of 8 of these episodes. There's one in this that eventually gets Crispin Glover after Ben Barnes kills him. I felt like that creature looked a little too silly to be scary, but I feel like it matches that kind of Cthulhu mythos. Like I can totally picture that being in a Lovecraft story. But it definitely had some of the most disturbing imagery. There's one scene where like he's having a nightmare that this witch woman is slicing his throat. Ben Barnes pictures this witch woman slicing his throat, and she cuts him really deep, and it was really gross to see. At the very end, his wife is cooking dinner, and she's got her back towards him, and I'm like, okay, her eyes are going to be missing, and of course they were super gross. It's like you could just picture her scooping her eyes out. And then the very worst is what happens to the son, if you want to describe that.
Well, I mean, he sees his wife missing her eyes, and she tells him, "You're interrupting dinner. Right. You're gonna ruin dinner." And I don't know if you realize, but like they pan the camera around slowly around the kitchen to the oven, which has smoke coming out of it. But before they even get to the oven, you just kind of see off in the background like a blood dripping from like the kitchen counter. she was also chopping vegetables in a very deliberate way, and I thought they were going to go dark and the wicked.
Right,
You know
right,
what,
right, right.
and I thought she was what I thought. I forgetting about the eyes. I thought she was going to turn around and she was going to have been cutting her own fingers off.
Right, right, right.
And I was kind of shocked that they didn't do that. But anyway, they turn. The smoke is coming out of the oven, and you just see like a camera angle from the back of the oven as he opens the door. The light comes in, and you see the outline of his son's head being cooked in the oven.
Good Lord.
And then it pans back to one of the pictures that Pickman had been drawing earlier that ends with at the bottom of the picture is a woman with no eyes holding a tray with a boy's head on it. And you're like, oh shit, they kind of told you they foreshadowed this and I missed it. And there it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought some of the CG with the monster and even the woman's eyes looked a little wonky, but then I was like, all right, it's a TV, it's TV. It's Netflix. It's not a feature-length film.
Right.
So I was okay. I think it did the best at giving you that Lovecraftian vibe, that like fear of the unknown, the there's evil in the world that we'll never be able to explain, and once it gets inside of our minds, it's going to rip us apart from the inside and destroy us mentally. And I love that shit. It's one of the things I'm drawn to about Lovecraft's work. It's why I love Lovecraft's adaptations. Sure, he was a vile racist and an anti-Semite, but he's been dead for 100 years, so I can kind of put that into the background.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to raise my ranking or my rating up to 7. I think I enjoyed it more now after talking to you. The next one, though, I'm going to stay firm and keep it at a 6. Dreams in the Witch House, I'm going to give a 6. If we're going by the discussion of Guillermo picking directors and wanting them to kind of use their vision for a story, the director for this is Catherine Harwick, and now she directed 13, Twilight, Lords of Dogtown, and Red Riding Hood. And I think when you watch this episode, that makes a lot of sense. She obviously has experience doing these sort of fairy tale with modern edge kind of thing, where she did the original Twilight movie, and then she also did Red Riding Hood, which had like Gary Oldman in it, and what's her name?
Amanda Seyfried.
Amanda Seyfried, exactly. So she has that look kind of down, and you see that in this episode. Visually, it's a fun episode, but it's just kind of silly. And do you remember we covered on this channel when we did our Lovecraft month? We covered the evil clergyman. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Right. There's a rat creature in that movie. That's a rat with a human head, and there's totally a rat with a human head in this episode too.
Yeah, and that is in the story too. In the original story, there's Leroy Brown. What was his name? Jenkins Brown.
Jenkins Brown, not Leroy Jenkins, but I like that
Yeah.
though.
And this episode, I think, got a little too silly for me.
Right, exactly.
And the thing about this episode that was weird is, and I think Daniel brought this up, the tone of this episode was just, it kept bouncing from like super dramatic with Rupert Grint, Ron Weasley from Harry Potter, with him like mourning the loss of his sister, and he's like really depressed and really sad. And then it goes, I felt overly comedic with the Jenkins Brown with the rat, like narrating and being kind of ridiculous. Right. And I wasn't really into the effects on the witch, Keziah Mason.
Yeah.
I thought she looked a little like, I don't know. It looked like.
Have you ever seen Suicide Squad? Have you seen the original Suicide Squad?
Yeah.
Do you remember like the monster that's like a a god. There's the two monsters in it. He looked like
At
this
the
one.
end?
Well, there's like a brother, and then there's the one who, like, there's a brother to the witch, and
Yeah.
it looks like him. It's like kind of the kind of CGI you'd see in sort of like second-rate action movies.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
it felt like. It
Yeah.
didn't feel like a Guillermo Del Toro like monster.
No.
It just felt like kind of like a cheaply made CGI thing.
Yeah.
And I wasn't that big of a fan of this episode. I'd probably give it like a 5-ish, 5.5, something like that.
Okay.
Like, you know, for the thing with these is these are longer than your average episode of TV.
Right.
But they're shorter than movies. They're
Right.
about an hour each.
Yeah.
So you're still investing, and because it's Netflix and there's no commercials, you're still investing a large amount of time in these episodes.
Yeah.
And so when one of them isn't great, you do kind of feel like you've just committed an hour for something that isn't great. You know, I would rather commit an hour and a half to a movie, because at least then I'm watching a full movie that gets, you know, maybe some more plot added to it. This just it didn't do it for me. I thought it was tonally inconsistent. I wasn't into the effects. I even was confused with like a lot of the lore in there about like there needed to be twins. The witch needed twins, and the house opens up other dimensions. But then there's this woman living in the house who's painting the future. It felt like it was trying to do too much with too many characters.
Yeah.
It's called Dreams in the Witch House. Go to the witch house, have some good nightmare sequences, and we're good. You know, give me some Lovecraftian craziness and we're good. And I thought that it got too muddled.
Sure.
And I think this was easily my least favorite of the 4 episodes.
Yeah, ditto. Yeah, it's definitely my least favorite, which now brings us to my favorite. And I would say that The Viewing, which is the 7th episode, would be, I would give it like a 9.5. Either 9.5, right? Most of that has to do with Panos Cosmatos. It's his direction. It's like the music that he chooses to use in his scenes. It's just these incredible sequences where often the characters in the center of the shot, they're not really moving. There's like a synth sound behind them. The image itself is usually saturated in like a single color. Like a lot of it is like saturated in like an orange color.
Orange,
in this episode. Yeah. And there's just something about it. I was trying to put a word to it as to like what it evokes, like what kind of feeling it is, because it almost feels like it's almost like a joke, kind of like it knows that it's like being like over dramatic. You know, like I think that Peter Weller, when he talks in this episode, like he knows he's kind of being ridiculous with what he's saying. You know,
I also think that Stephen Agee, who is from Peacemaker, he's kind of talking for us a little bit throughout the episode.
Yeah.
And he's kind of saying things out loud that we're probably thinking.
Right.
Like calling out certain characters, pointing out how ridiculous things are.
Right.
Like there's where like you're like, oh, everybody here, try this amazing bottle of whiskey from that was from Hiroshima. But also here's some fresh lines of cocaine, and if you're gonna do cocaine, this is the night to do it. You know,
right.
And it's just like, and he's like, well, you don't have to ask me. You don't have to ask me twice to go to a cocaine party.
Right.
So I kind of liked the craziness of this episode.
Yeah.
I agree with you. And what I think I like the most about it is that it's called The Viewing, and The Viewing is actually like not that important. It comes like almost towards like the last third to last quarter of the episode.
Oh yeah.
And again, you have Stephen Agee. He shows off this like meteor slash, I don't know, rock that has made of material that nobody knows what's inside of it. Is it from hell? Who knows what it is?
Yeah.
But Stephen Agee is just like, you brought us all this way to look at a rock,
right?
And again, it's kind of like, speaking for the audience and pointing out the craziness of everything that's going on.
Yeah,
and
he's the audience.
No, I also love that, like, he brings in, of the four people he brings in, he's like, I brought in experts from everywhere on the spectrum. And he brings in like one legitimate scientist. And the other was like, you're an expert in mixing music. You're an expert in, you're a writer and you're a psychic. Like, there's no connection to anything with those four people. I really thought this episode was out there, but it's out there in a way that if you like Mandy and other Panos Cosmatos stuff, you're going to be into it.
Yes. Okay, so like you mentioned how it's like 1/3 of the episode is the actual viewing part. It almost feels like it's the last 10 minutes of an hours long story, and that 50 minutes is just the prep for it, and then the last 10 minutes is they're looking at the meteor, and then it starts to open up and crazy shit happens. But like the majority of it is just them like talking, and like it's almost like a play or something. And then you mentioned the experts that were brought in. It's a very random cast. We have Steve Agee, like you said, but then you also have Eric Andre, who I know he's a comedian. I know he's had his own kind of like sketch show on like Adult Swim. I've never seen him act in anything, and I thought he was really great in this as the music maker or whatever, Randall Roth. Then you have Charlene Amanda Yee, who, like, I think she was in like Paper Tigers or Paper Moon. There's some movie that she's in with Michael Cera that I thought she was really good in, where she was like the lead. But a lot of times she's sort of the
so the movie she's in with Michael Cera isn't Scott Pilgrim.
No.
Okay.
No. It's like an indie movie where she's the main character and she's kind of awkward and she gets with Michael Cera. And just how different she is from everybody else. But she's like in Knocked Up. She's in a bunch of those kind of movies where she's just like a little supporting character. Then you have Sophia Boutella, who plays Dr. Zara, who's supplying all the cocaine and stuff, and she gives drugs and stuff to Peter Weller. I'm actually a big fan of Sophia Boutella. I thought that she was really great in Star Trek Beyond. I didn't see The Mummy, but I'm assuming she did a good job in that. She's in a whole bunch of things, though, too.
Yeah, and there's this like just out of nowhere scene of dialogue where she starts talking about her like being a doctor for Omar Gaddafi.
Right.
And she's like, "Oh, everybody thinks they know Gaddafi, but he was charming." And I'm like, "What the fuck is going on?" Like, yeah. This episode made me feel like I did lines of great cocaine and drank Hiroshima whiskey. So
yeah, well, the guy that wrote it, I didn't really mention the behind the scenes stuff for every single episode yet, but the guy that wrote this, his name's Aaron Stewart On, and he co-wrote it with Panos Cosmatos. This guy, Aaron Stewart On, also wrote The Witcher Blood Origin, which I'm guessing is some kind of prequel series. He did a kind of like a cartoon for Thor called Thor. I wrote the wrong title down. But he also co-wrote Mandy, this guy, too. So obviously he has a working relationship with Panos Cosmatos, and they were just going and doing some weird shit. And like what's interesting about the show is that you have like 2 episodes based on Lovecraft stories. Then you have one that's like based on they just made this up for this show. And then the last episode is based on a Guillermo Del Toro story that he wrote. He wrote the story for it. But before we leave this episode, though, I want to talk about the ending, because the ending is pretty fucking epic. Like when the meteorite opens up, I mean, Eric Andre, like, he keeps lighting up like a cigarette, and then Peter Weller says like the same thing every time. He's like, Randall, you can't smoke in here. And then he like lights up again. Happens like 3 times. And then
He
like
lights a cigarette. He goes, "You can't smoke in here, Randall." He goes, "Oh, okay, okay."
yeah,
No,
right,
Randall, you can't smoke in here. Okay. And then he brings up a joint. He goes, "Randall, I said you can't smoke in here."
right,
Oh, I didn't know that applied to joints too.
right. And then he like blows the pot smoke accidentally into the meteorite, and it comes to life, and it's just so fucking perfect. Like I love that whole sequence. It like kills people randomly. Like these horns kind of sprout out and they move around, and there's this golden creature, and like it makes Stephen Agee's head blow up. It like disintegrates the psychic. It like melts and then sort of like absorbs Peter Weller, and then it becomes this creature. And there's another guy who's like a mercenary that works for him, and he shoots him with a golden fucking machine gun, right? And like then the creature zaps him, and every death is really like epic and cool looking.
They like melt.
Yeah.
And yeah, it felt very ending of Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yes.
In a way where, you know, it's beautiful, and then all of a sudden, you know.
Yeah. Right.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Is this the episode that ends with like whatever, like the oozing monster from the whatever the rock is? It ends up in like the water, and is that what we're supposed to see? Like
it like walks out of a sewer drain, and then there's a city there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, that's what I'm thinking. Yes, it comes out of like a sewer drain, and you're supposed to like effectively think that whatever this is, it's now out and it's about to like wipe out humankind.
Right. Yes.
Okay. You know, it's funny. The more we talk about this episode, the more I think I may have liked this one even more than Pickman. I would have originally given this. What did I give Pickman? 8.5. I'd probably give Pickman an 8, and I'd give this one about an 8.5 to a 9.
Nice. Okay, we're pretty close in agreement on these so far. So then that brings us up to the last episode, the Murmuring, and I've already kind of said a little bit of my thoughts on this episode. I'm going to say right off the bat that I would give this one about a 7.5 because I think it's beautifully shot. I think that the two actors in it are fantastic, Essie Davis and Andrew Lincoln. It's just that I kind of knew exactly everything that was going to happen. And it's all about people that are watching birds, studying birds, taking records of birds. Now, the thing is, that's probably kind of boring to a lot of people. And it's kind of boring to me as well. I don't want to seem ignorant, but a good show, a good story can take a boring subject, but show you the most interesting aspect of it. You know, like I'm sure there's a lot of people that are bored by chess, right? But then you have a show like The Queen's Gambit, which makes it this super exciting thing. And I think that like they do make it seem interesting, like what's going on with these birds and like their migrations and stuff. But I wasn't captivated by that. As far as like the drama, I feel like that was the strongest aspect. You know, we're both fathers. We obviously often talk about how we're affected by movies where they show children dying or like if there's a loss of a child. And that's the whole focus of this episode is dealing with the grief of losing your child. And I felt like that was very effective, but it's just kind of like, show me something different. I felt like there's the same scene over and over again to a conclusion that I kind of anticipated.
I think I'm on the same wavelength. I think that I almost wish that this wasn't a horror story. This feels more in line with something like Marriage Story, and combined with the added element of losing a child.
Yeah.
And the fact that there's a ghost story in it kind of feels superfluous.
Yeah.
And unnecessary, especially because at the end of the day, the ghost story is super basic.
Right,
and
exactly.
There's absolutely no surprise in this ghost story. Like Essie Davis's character needs to find out who this family was living in the house and what happened between the mother and the son. And like the whole time you're thinking, Well, isn't it obvious? Like the mom went crazy and, drowned the son.
Right.
And the son, the ghost of the son is wet and cold. And the ghost of the mother is saying, "What have I done? What have I done?"
Yeah.
And, she's angry at the guy for leaving her there alone.
Right.
And, that whole idea is now like being passed on to a mother whose child has died. We don't know how. We just know that their child has died.
Yeah.
And it, like, at the end, we find out that, to the shock of no one, the mother drowned the kid in the bathtub. And I'm like, oh, so, like the Murmuring, I like the idea of this. This to me could have been 99% drama and just a 1% horror story, where in the Murmuring, as the birds are flying and in that like beautiful cinematography of like capturing the birds going in their various ways, migration patterns and whatnot, you just hear things, subtle things. But even then, it wasn't subtle. It's like she's like, wait, what was that? I'm cold. It's like, oh, it's like, it's not subtle enough. Like, I wanted it to be more subtle. I wanted it to be more creepy.
Right.
And the ghost story really let me down. Essie Davis, who was brilliant in The Babadook, her and Andrew Lincoln were fantastic in this episode.
Right.
And like I said, if this was a 2-hour drama,
right,
they probably are getting nominated for Academy Awards.
Right.
Unfortunately, I feel like it was a really good drama weighed down by a kind of boring paint by numbers ghost story.
Right. So
what did you give it? I would probably rank this. What did you give it? A 7? I'd probably go like 5.5 to 6.
Whoa, more harsh.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I was going to say, have you seen the movie Manchester by the Sea with Casey Affleck? Are you okay over there? What?
Yes, that was me going, ugh.
Okay.
I hated that movie. I fucking hated that movie. Sorry, I did. Okay,
well, the reason why I bring that up is spoilers for that movie. It's about death of children, and that's pretty bleak. But this reminded me of that type of movie. Whereas I think that, Guillermo, he was the producer of The Orphanage, but he didn't write or direct it. And I think that, like, I was maybe expecting more of that based on the initial parts of this episode. But then
this did feel like I don't know if you saw his first couple of movies. His
Devil's
first
Backbone.
What?
Devil's Backbone and
Devil's Backbone and Chronos. Yeah, were very good, effectively mostly dramas, but with really good ghost stories / vampire stories kind of attached to them.
Right.
And this kind of felt like he was trying to get back to that route, but the ghost story didn't. There was nothing to really sink your teeth into with the ghost story. It was everything you thought it was going to be the second it started. Like, I never finished Crimson Peak.
Oh,
because it's a movie that I started probably 15 different times and either fell asleep 10 minutes in or just decided I can't do it tonight. I'm going to turn it off.
Okay.
And I don't know. This kind of felt like I felt like I was feeling that type of feeling in this very often.
Yes.
Like, Athena came in and sat down while I was watching it. And like, if Athena had been in the room during like the viewing episode, especially at the end, or PICKMAN'S model, or Graveyard Rats, she probably would have been like, what are you watching? And either just ignored the TV, or probably gotten up and watched something in the other room.
Right.
She just kind of sat and like read while this episode was on.
Right,
because
right.
it was very easy to like pretend you're not watching anything scary or horror while this was on.
Right.
I also feel like this was the wrong episode to
To end it.
conclude the series with.
Absolutely.
Because
Absolutely.
it has kind of like it has a cathartic ending.
Yes.
But on the whole, like it's a Guillermo Del Toro horror series.
Yeah.
Like you want to go out with some kind of bang, some kind of like scare, some kind of monster.
Right.
And it just felt like I almost feel like this should have been episode 1 or 2. And then maybe end with the viewing.
Yes.
Or even end, because it's Del Toro, have end with one of the Lovecraft stories, because it at least that makes sense. For Del Toro loves Lovecraft. He wants to make Lovecraft stuff all the time.
Right.
This I feel like I'm shitting all over it. I want to at least point out the acting is phenomenal.
Oh, absolutely.
I just didn't love it as a horror story, and I didn't think it was the best episode to close out an 8 episode like individual horror series, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I feel the same way. I feel like you could have ended with Outside too, or The Outside, you know? That would have been great, just with her looking at the camera, like at the weird faces, you know?
Yeah, I don't know if you guys brought it up. I didn't. But that was very Pearl-esque. I don't know if you saw the movie Pearl yet.
Not yet. I will though.
Yeah. I won't say anymore, but that was very Mia Goth.
Yeah. So, okay, we're very much on the same page for the majority of these episodes. I feel like the same way you did about this episode. It was very, like, the same kind of thing kept happening, right? Where it'd be like, they would have a little discussion. He would try to get kind of intimate with her, and she'd push him away. Then you'd have a sequence where, like, she's sitting somewhere and it's quiet, and then you'd hear a child's voice, but then he'd come in and be like, oh, what are you hearing? And he doesn't hear it. And that just kind of happened over and over again. And so I did kind of feel like, all right, are we getting towards the end? But I still think that it was beautifully shot. I think I was really happy to see Andrew Lincoln in a performance like that. I enjoyed it, but yeah, I absolutely agree that it shouldn't have been like the last episode, like maybe like the 3rd or something.
Yeah.
So it sounds like we're in agreement that we want there to be more of this show.
Definitely.
Like, give us some more Cabinet of Curiosities. There's a lot of things going on the channel. This is our 100th episode of our podcast, and hopefully many hundreds more to come. But from my point, you can tell us what you got coming up too. I just released the interview I did with Lucas Amon. That's on our YouTube channel, and it's on our podcast channel as well. He did this book called Warmth, which is narrated by Doug Bradley as an audiobook.
That's awesome.
So we have this. Then at the beginning of next week, my friend Joshua McMillan, I interviewed him. That interview is going to be on the channel next Monday. And Danny and I are also on my other channel, which is called Comic Books Transformed. And Danny and I have been covering the show The Peripheral. So you can find that on YouTube, Comic Books Transformed. You can also find that on podcast, regular podcast stations. And then on the Comic Books Transformed, Brian and I are going to be covering Wakanda Forever this weekend. So Danny, what do you have on the Laster Cast right now?
Well, we are going to be starting, I believe, Friday night. We're going to do a review of episodes 1 through 6 of Anne Rice's Interview with a Vampire on AMC. Right. Athena is sitting over there. She just gave me a big smile because we actually have to watch episode 6 tonight. We're going to watch that probably later. Talk about a show that we're genuinely loving, like, and kind of shocked that we're loving, because both of us were like, I don't know, we'll start it, see what happens.
Best stat ever.
Yes. I don't know if you heard her. She
agree, Athena. Totally
there
agree.
You go. 100%. Yeah. Tom Cruise, eat your heart out.
Yes.
Even the written list stat, like.
Well, I wouldn't know about that. I don't read much. But yeah, so we're going to be doing episodes 1 through 6 of that on Friday to set up for the finale, which I believe is happening this weekend, Sunday. So and then probably Monday we're going to do a review of the finale, or maybe even Sunday night. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. We'll see. We'll see. Yeah, how it all plays out.
So you recommended, you posted something to me the other day. Shudder just put up a movie, and I watched it yesterday. And
Oh,
I
really?
don't think I have had as much fun watching a ridiculous movie like this in a long time. But I might do a short review of Bloody Muscle Bodybuilder in Hell, which, along with having the best title of any movie I think I've ever heard, is the best Evil Dead like homage ripoff that you've ever seen.
Yes.
I loved this movie. I kept calling Charlotte into the room just to watch parts of it because she's seen all of the Evil Dead movies and Ash vs. Evil Dead, of course. And I was like, just watch this. What is this movie? And she was like, is it like trying to be Evil Dead? I'm like, yes, yes, it is.
Yeah.
It's
awesome.
so ridiculous. It's on Shudder. I think I have to do a short review of it just because more people need to watch this movie. It's 63 minutes.
Oh, nice.
So like it's effectively an episode of Cabinet of Curiosities.
Right.
And there's another movie on Screambox that I think you and I ought to cover soon called All Jacked Up Full of Worms.
Okay.
Which I have heard some real nasty shit about. I've heard some people genuinely having some negative reactions to that movie. And I don't mean negative in that they didn't like it. I mean negative as in they needed to stop the movie and go throw. Yeah, a little bit. So
some Terrifier 2 reactions, huh?
I love Terrifier 2.
Man, I need to eventually cover that too. I've been editing some footage from it into my Joshua McMillan interview, and I haven't seen Terrifier 1 or 2, so I want to watch those.
Screambox. They're on Screambox.
Right. And then besides that too, Danny and I, you covered just like the first episode of Midnight Mass, right?
Yes. We still have to do a season recap of Midnight Mass, which we will get to.
Wait. I just fucked you up. It's Midnight Club.
You did. Yes, Midnight Club. We have to do a season recap of the Midnight Club. My review of episode 1 was up on the channel right after Comic-Con where they debuted it. If you want to watch the full Midnight Club panel from Comic-Con, that is one of our biggest videos of the year. We were able to just film the whole thing. I was sitting front row. You got Flanagan and the whole cast there. Really awesome. So yeah, you guys can check that out. So yeah, I think that's it. Interview with a Vampire coming up. The Peripheral over on Comic Books Transformed. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, so we always have a ton of horror content for you every week from the Lassercast. Come join the discussion with us. Make sure you guys subscribe. We can always use those likes too. So we will see you guys and Cthulhu next time.